So, hello everyone. I am David Romanowsky, and I'm a psychotherapist working in a harm reduction framework. And I'm honored and delighted to be with one of my mentors and friends, Andrew Tatarsky, Dr. Andrew Tatarsky. He is the founder, he was the founder of the Center of the Optimal Living in New York and has done a lot of research around harm reduction psychotherapy, one of the pioneer voices, and has also written a book about harm reduction psychotherapy. And I can go on and on and on about your trajectory, but I would like first and foremost to start the conversation. So tell me, a bit about your experience in harm reduction seminar here in Colombia, Harm Reduction International. How has it been?
I've had just an amazingly wonderful 2 days, almost 2 days now. Many of the presentations have been just brilliant. I mean, literally, like one after the other, with these brilliant analyses, really complex analyses. I've been learning a lot. And I've been networking with old colleagues, friends, long time, some of them are pretty old by now, and meeting a number of new people. So it's just been very, very rich for me in terms of the networking and the reconnecting. It's really like for me, since I've been around the harm reduction world for 30 years, more than 30 years, it's like my family, like a family reunion. So that's been wonderful.
So glad that it's been a wonderful experience. And I wanted to say this: when we talk about harm reduction, it's about community. It's about community, but at the same time, you've mentioned it's also about the change of paradigm. Can you please provide our audience about, what exactly you mean about changing the narrative and changing the paradigm, particularly in the treatment setting for people who use drugs?
Yeah. Well, in the treatment setting for people who use drugs, I think since the middle part of the 20th century, there's been a dominant paradigm, which is an old disease model, which is now morphed into, NIDA's brain disease model, which, supports what we call an abstinence-only approach to treatment. So in substance use treatment, abstinence has been the only measure of success, often a ticket to get into treatment and to remain in treatment, the successful achieving that. And it's also infiltrated the broader mental health field such that many mental health practitioners, the majority of them, have been taught and believe that that people who are struggling with substances need to stop in order to benefit from mental health treatment. And that dominant paradigm is based on, kind of an understanding and a practice. And it has been an abysmal failure. In the United States, where I'm from, it has failed to help the overwhelming majority of people that struggle with substances. And I would argue that it's been largely responsible for the worst overdose and drug poisoning crisis, over the last 20 years in history. So, and this really started, it became clear back in the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 80s, where people were dying left and right. And that abstinence-only approach was really keeping people out of treatment, substance use treatment and HIV treatment. So harm reduction really emerged as an alternative that put saving lives and helping people stay healthy before attempting to get them to stop their risky or harmful behaviors. And unfortunately, it seems to take a crisis, an epidemic, to shake people out of these old ideas and be open to new ones. So more currently, this terrible overdose, drug poisoning crisis, and the failure of the treatment system to be helpful, I think has opened the door for harm reduction now to really emerge as an alternative framework that I'm arguing and I believe is the best frame for the entire continuum of care for people that struggle with drugs. But that's the shift in practice. A shift in practice really needs to ride on or be supported by a shift in the model, a shift in thinking. And so I think that the paradigm shift we're in right now is moving from this old disease model, addiction as disease, to thinking about addictive experience as universal, and addictive behavior, or what we call addictive behavior, as a meaningful response to suffering.
And this is when you said, sorry to interrupt, that the disease model and the moral model of addiction, which is the previous one, are both anti-meaning. Can you please comment on that idea?
Well, to take this very complex experience that we might call addictive experience, feeling driven, feeling compulsive, feeling like continuing to engage in this behavior despite the fact that it has risks and negative consequences. To take that complex experience that gets expressed in certain problematic, risky behaviors and reduce it to a gene, or, as Nida says, the impact of substance use on the brain, I think collapses something that is much more complex and meaningful. And so it reinforces an avoidance, a denial, a dissociation of the meaning. And what is that meaning? This alternative paradigm is, of course, when you take a substance, it affects our biology, but it lands in a human being, a complex, meaning-making human being. And so that experience takes on meaning in relation to that person in their lifestyle, in the social context, in the relationships. And so this earlier, collapsed approach supports an avoidance of meaning, but when we shift to a lens of, considering how this experience and behavior can be multiply meaningful, it opens up all sorts of possibilities for supporting people and making positive change around a problematic relationship to a substance.
This kind of reminds me, Andrew, about what Johan Arias said about the disconnection sometimes causing part of the addictive process. And I think about this conference about what a wonderful opportunity to build community, to strengthen our bonds. Can you mention a little bit about how community can become a protective factor in lieu of what we're talking about, which is harm reduction?
Well, so let me say a few words about trauma. I believe that trauma is usually at the heart of this addictive experience in one way or another. It could be early developmental trauma. It could be big T trauma, rape, etc. Or it could be the trauma of being a person who uses illicit drugs in a context that criminalizes, stigmatizes, punishes, etc. Now, Gabor Mate has a very neat way of thinking about trauma. That trauma, he says, is not what happens to you, but how you respond internally, inside, as a way to protect yourself. You need, from this overwhelmingly threatened experience, you need to disconnect from yourself, from your authenticity. And Bessel van der Kolk, who is another trauma leading voice, says that trauma happens when there's no relational home. So if I am, assaulted, if I'm, experiencing this overwhelming threat, and there's nobody there to help me process it, cope with it, then I need to resort to this disconnection as a way to cope, so I don't, go crazy, fall apart. Right? So where that can get healed is in relationship. So a kind of safe, supportive relationship, either one-on-one in therapy or with a friend or with families or with a community that really provides a safe container for feeling like I can begin to connect with myself and express myself and integrate and heal that traumatic experience.
So we may have possibly been hurt in relationships, and our task is to heal up in the context of relationships. Okay.
And I have another colleague friend, Jack Saul, who wrote a book called Collective Trauma, Collective Healing. And, we've been talking a lot at this conference about how the collective social systems and social structures, globally around people who use drugs have been traumatizing in so many ways. And what Jack Saul says is that when we have a collective trauma, we may need a collective approach to healing.
Sure.
And so, this international global harm reduction community is a community that, is there for each of us as individuals to kind of feel healed or held by.
Sure.
And then, through, bringing all of this out into all of these communities that all of us come from, and creating, healing spaces based on this loving, supportive, compassionate, courageous, work that we all do.
Sure. Thanks for that info, by the way. Just to round things up, I wanted to end this conversation with this idea, which is how can we promote healing and not lose our hope within the harm reduction framework, knowing that we're facing this political turmoil and climate and hostility? How can we remain hopeful that together we can stick and find strategies to heal and continue our fight?
Well, the first thought that comes to my mind is staying connected to love, staying connected to loving connections and relationships, which is really at the heart of harm reduction therapy, harm reduction practice more widely. This is what helps me stay hopeful, that I'm part of this global network of people that this conference reminds me exist all around the world, working to improve the quality of everyone's life and the quality of health on the planet. And so that's what keeps me inspired and hopeful, being connected to this community.
Yeah, our resilient and peaceful and loving spirit can certainly serve as a protective factor despite all the turmoil that we're facing. Dr. Andrew Tatarsky, thank you so much for the time. It was great meeting you in person, and please keep on enjoying the event the rest of the time that you're here in Colombia.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to connect with you and to just share a little bit about my work with our family, our harm reduction family.
Thank you.